Good morning, family. It is good to see all of you in this place. Gracious God, help us, hold us, disturb us, use us for your glory. In your name we pray. Amen. To all of the members of the Congressional Black Caucus and all of our friends from around the country who are here this morning, I'm honored and humbled to be here. The video that you were going to see, Congressman Butterfield said, I hope we can get it on, but what it was going to show you is all over the country, Congressman Lee, black and white people and Latinos and Asians coming together, Reverend Jackson, around a call, a poor people's campaign, a national call for a moral revival. The woman you actually saw there is Callie Greer from Alabama, whose child died in her arms because Alabama refused to expand Medicaid. And now she's coordinating with white women and Latino women in Alabama to raise up a moral stance and a powerful movement in the South. And she believes it's possible. I want to thank you so much for allowing me to come and be here. Congressman Butterfield, thank you, Charlotte. Thank you always for being my congressperson. I want to thank the chair of the Legislative Black Caucus this morning, for Sister Karen, for allowing us to come and be here. I want to suggest this morning that the coordinated cover-up is a call to action. The coordinated cover-up is a call to action. It's not a time to be depressed. It's not a time to whimper. It's not a time to mourn. Sometimes a good slap in the mouth will wake you up. And I want to lay out kind of an action agenda for movement. And here is some language. First thing is we must issue a clear call to our moral and political allies. Maybe it could sound like this. The coordinated cover-up we are witnessing as senators conspire to facilitate Trump's obstruction of Congress is deeply troubling to anyone who knows the history of Southern courthouses, where district attorneys openly coordinated with all-white juries and corrupt judges to cover up acts of racial terror. Why don't we just call it what it is? With patience and decorum, Mitch McConnell has brought Southern justice to the United States Senate. As in our nation's history, we need a moral fusion movement to reclaim the American democracy. What does this Southern justice look like? Well, in the summer of 1964, when 3 civil rights workers disappeared while investigating a church bombing in Philadelphia, Mississippi, local authorities told the FBI their investigation had found nothing. Because hundreds of college students from the nation's elite university had turned the nation's attention on Mississippi that Freedom Summer, the FBI could not simply move on. They spent the entire summer combing the area for more evidence. In the end, they found a literal cover-up. Andrew Goodman, Mickey Swanner, James Chaney had been murdered and buried in a local dam as a part of a conspiracy that included the Ku Klux Klan, the Philadelphia Police Department, the Neshoba County Sheriff's Department, the DA, and others. And they found bodies they weren't even looking for. In 2 months of investigations to expose one cover-up, federal authorities found the remains of 8 other African Americans. Half a century later, we have fewer voting rights protections in America than we did in 1965, ever since what the Supreme Court did with Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. We who are the heirs of the American civil rights struggle know how fragile this hard-won multi-ethnic democracy is. For generations after the end of Reconstruction, anyone who dared to believe the 13th, 14th, and the 15th Amendments guaranteed them the rights of full citizenship were subject to terrorism by local law enforcement. If a crime was committed to rig the next election, it was covered up. This was the everyday practice of Southern justice under Jim Crow, and McConnell has brought Southern justice again to the United States Senate. Americans must remember from the Nixon impeachment that the cover-up is the evidence of the crime. But it's more than that. Time and time again, the justice movement has learned that the cost of the cover-up is democracy itself. When people who have the power can abuse that power to influence elections and suppress the electoral power of those who would challenge them, we do not have a representative democracy. We have Southern justice covering for minority rule. But if we, who've been denied full citizenship in this nation, know the cost of the cover-up, we also know the power of moral movements to tap a greater power and push America towards a more perfect union. Slaveholders invested everything they had to cover up the crimes of human bondage. Jim Crow did everything it knew to cover up the immorality of separate but equal. And for a long time, it looked like they had all the votes. But movements of people committed to the truth did not give up. They kept believing and building on the conviction that the moral arc of the universe bends toward justice. And they uncovered the lies that crippled democracy in their day. Our present moral crisis demands nothing less. We appeal today to the American people to rise up, link up, vote in 2020 for senators and presidents who will respect the Constitution, its principles of equal protection under the law for Americans. I want to suggest as one strategy, why don't we turn something like this into a call to action? A call to action for black folk, white folk, brown folk, native folk, any folk that believe in justice. And why don't we use it for a call to action to get 1 million people to sign on to it, not to say they're going to vote, but to say they're going to organize and push out the vote in 2020 like never before. And why don't we say something that Reverend Jackson has said for us to say psychologically in our head? Stop saying Trump won. He won by 80,000 votes in 3 states. But in one of them, Wisconsin, 250,000 votes were suppressed. In Michigan, he won by 10,000 votes. 100,000 Negroes in Detroit didn't vote. What we have seen is not victory, but a cover-up. He lost by more than 3 million votes in the popular vote. We must decide that we will pull the covers off of what's going on. And we have to do that. Because if you don't, because the tongue, what you say can get you in a whole lot of trouble. The power of the tongue, and the power of the tongue is life and death. And if you speak defeat and keep living in defeat and talking the wrong narrative, then in fact defeat will be yours. Number 2, we need a strategy. What next part? Number 2 strategy is there's no way we can inspire people to move with the normal politics that doesn't fully address poverty. That is why the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, is mobilizing all across this country, more than 100 partners now, 16 denominations, 43 state coordinated committees, and we are planning on June 20 of 2020 to bring thousands of every race, creed, and color here to D.C. to push not only what the problems are, but what the solutions are. And it will not be people speaking on behalf of poor and low wealth people, but poor and low wealth people speaking on their own behalf. We must call for a moral revival, and it must be deeply rooted in a clear, all-out commitment to address poverty and low wealth. Particularly the Black Caucus must demand that we address poverty and low wealth, not incrementally and not with formulas that leave communities out. We must start with the real numbers. There are not 39 million poor people in America. There are 140 million poor and low-wealth people in America. 60% of black people, 26 million. 66 million white people, 30%, are poor and low wealth. 62 million people make less than a living wage. And we have allowed 30 presidential debates to go on and not one on poverty and low wealth or on systemic racism. At some point, the blame is on what we demand or don't demand. By only talking about 40 million people in poverty, and not the 140 million people in poverty and low wealth, and these numbers have been validated by numerous think tanks and places, including the Columbia School of Public Policy. Without an accurate assessment of who is poor, then we are participating in a policy cover-up. We came to the 140 million by looking at the U.S. Census data gathered for the supplemental poverty measure and counting up to 199% of that poverty threshold. Shally Gupta-Barnes, step out, Shally, is our economist and attorney who's helping to lead this effort. She's right over to my left. And we said that when you capture everyone who falls below the line and everybody just above it, what you have is 60% of black folk are poor and low wealth, 64% of Latinos are poor and low wealth, 40% of Asians are poor and low wealth, 59% of natives are poor and low wealth, and 1/3 of all the poor and low wealth, 66 million, are white. 40 million more than black people in terms of raw numbers, but also 40% less in terms of precision. And when you can work a full-time job at minimum wage and still not be able to afford a 2-bedroom apartment anywhere in this country, that's poor. And if we can't see that, and if we don't acknowledge that poverty, then we are refusing to call upon these witnesses among us, not just the 40 million, but the 140 million. And as James Baldwin said, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. This is the truth to which we are accountable, which this country is accountable. Not me or anyone else in this room, but to the 140 million people who do not know if they have 3 nutritious meals today, or if they will need to share their heart medication or buy diapers instead of paying their utilities or have a roof over their heads. That is the crisis we face today. This is the state of our union. Every state that is a racist voter suppression state is a red state, and it's also a high poverty state. All you have to know is that a state is a racist voter suppression state, and you know it's a high poverty state, you know that it's a denied health care state, you know that it's an attacked Latino state, you know that it's a denial of living wage state. But what else do we know? We also know now from a study we're putting out in a little bit that if you mobilize 2 to 10%, not 30, not 40, Maxine, but if you organize 2 to 10% of the poor around an agenda, you can fundamentally shift every election in this country. Not 20%, not 30%, but 2 to 10%. And if we're going to do this, we must address the lie of scarcity and not allow America or anyone to say we don't have the money. Why? We put 53 cents of every discretionary dollar into military, which primarily goes to defense contractors, and less than 15 cents of every discretionary dollar into addressing the issue of health care and education. Right now, child poverty costs $1 trillion a year. But we know if we take 2% of the federal budget and put it toward issues that address child poverty, it could reduce it by 60%, and it could be an economic driver. Right now, we know if we raise the minimum wage to $15, we put $328 billion back into the economy. Right now, we know that $1 billion spent on SNAP produces $1.7 billion in economic growth. More than when we put it into war. And if we don't have this moral movement, if we don't address this issue, here's the lick. We will never energize the 100 million Americans who stayed home in 2016. Most of them among the 140 million poor and low-wealth people who never hear their issue. They hear debate after debate after debate after debate, and they hear us talk about the middle class and the wealthy, and never talk about the poor. In Kentucky, let me give you something real. In Kentucky, how did the new governor win? Well, the Poor People's Campaign that never endorsed the candidate, but working with Kentuckians for the Commonwealth, for 3 years we worked to bring black, poor, and low-wealth people from Louisville together with white coal miners together. We focused on 5 counties. 2 counties we worked in flipped from overwhelmingly Trump to the new governor, because it's possible that a new electorate can be changed if we mobilize poor and low-wealth people. And we will never change the South, where 1/3 of America's poor and low-wealth people are, if we don't address the issue of poverty and low wealth. And only a coalition of poor, black, and white, and brown people and native people can change the political calculus. And changing the South is a must. As long, and I ain't talking partisan, I'm talking like I'm talking, as long as Democrats try to find a wall to win that doesn't go through the South, they're going to lose. Oh, I knew I wasn't going to get no amen, but I don't care. It's the truth. Changing the South is a must. And if we intend to shift the moral direction of this nation, and if the Black Caucus and black preachers don't demand that candidates focus on what is impacting 61% of black people, then we are abdicating our power and our reason for existing. We have listened to the political consultants enough. They say don't talk about poverty. They say we don't have the money. They say somebody accused you of socialism. Well, according to some folks' definition of socialism, Jesus was a socialist. So you don't worry about being accused, just tell the truth. So what do we have? For 50 years, Republicans have racialized poverty. Democrats have run from poverty or come up with synonyms like those working to get in the middle class. No, some people are poor and low wealth. And look at where that has gotten us. Look at where that strategy has gotten us. 150 years after the 15th Amendment, millions of black folks and poor whites and others have walked away from the ballot box because they don't believe going will make a difference. 100 million of them just sit out, and many of them make up the 140 million poor and low wealth people, because they and other poor Americans rarely hear a politician call their name or call their condition. And any nation that doesn't address poverty is in moral crisis. And we can't address it without taking on the interlocking injustices of systemic racism, ecological devastation, militarism, the war economy, and a distorted religious narrative and white evangelicalism that says the only thing God is concerned about is prayer in the school, being against gay people, being against a woman's right to choose, guns, and voting Republican. That is a heresy. Not just a lie, it's a heresy. Here's the third thing. The third thing I feel we must do is the Black Caucus came into existence for one purpose: to be the conscience of the Congress. Period. That is why this caucus can't sound like either party. If we don't raise the issue of poverty and systemic racism and ecological devastation and the war economy, then the Black Caucus and the black church will have abdicated our moral responsibility. God did not let us get into all these positions we have now to be quiet on the very thing that our foreparents raised. You don't get power and then get cute. You get power and get ugly for your people. It's time to turn from convenience to conscience. Let me give you an example. Right now in Louisiana, in Cancer Alley, poor, mostly black people and some white, face genocide from chemical corporation. If the Black Caucus and the Black Church don't demand that every presidential candidate go to Cancer Alley and demand that it be addressed, we are abdicating our responsibility. Right now, in Oak Flats, Arizona, the Apache Nations, holy lands, federal lands, their lands, our lands, have been given away to a multinational corporation for an open pit mine that will destroy the land and the water aquifers. If the caucus and black preachers don't demand that every presidential candidate address this issue, if they did, an entire Native American community would be inspired to know who to vote for. In North Carolina, Tom Tillis led the effort for surgical racism. Every law he put up when he was speaker, we beat him. But he won by only 40,000 votes, running on the campaign that he produced the worst voter suppression of the 20th century. He also blocked 2 black women from even getting a hearing to be on the federal bench. He did that, and it was all covered up. And if we don't speak to that issue, then there's no wonder that 500,000 African Americans don't vote in North Carolina or didn't vote, because it is our responsibility to challenge the narrative. What America needs right now, and I know a lot of people have already endorsed candidates. I kind of wish y'all had held them. Held your endorsement till you get your issues. But anyway, what America needs right now is an endorsement of ideas, not personality. The question is not who can beat Trump, but who can enliven, inspire the country and the electorate. That's who can beat Trump and the political extremism that goes along with it. And if you're too scared in a primary to say who you really are and who you're really with, how in the hell are you going to expect them to do that in a general election? The caucus must demand a progressive Southern strategy. And the party that doesn't have a fully funded Southern strategy will lose. Keep messing around with these consultants. Those 13 states control 26 Senate seats, which means you only need 25 from the other 37 states to control the United States Senate. And this is at a time when the demographics say if you just increase by 5 to 10% the poor and low wealth people voting around an agenda, you could fundamentally shift the political calculus in North Carolina, Virginia, Georgia, and watch this, Mississippi and Texas. And the outcome, and any party or candidate that will just write off the South wants to lose. And any black politician that doesn't run like they have competition this time, even if you don't have competition, even if you're unopposed, so that their candidates can expand the electorate, is not serious about change. They're just serious about holding an office. Let us not forget it was in 1868, 1875 that black and white fusion coalitions controlled the South. And please don't tell me that our foreparents fresh out of slavery had more sense than us. Did none of them go to Harvard? Did none of them go to Boston? Did none of them go to North Carolina Central, A&T? But fresh out of slavery, they knew if they could get former slave and poor white folk to work together, they could control the South and thereby control the nation. Fifth thing, we must make it clear, fourth thing, that Trump, McConnell, and his allies are engaged in the politics of fear. in the 1867 impeachment trial, let me have some water, when President Johnson dodged removal by a single vote, the members of Congress who allowed his abuse of power did so because they feared the black-white fusion vote. They feared black people in the South becoming citizens of the Reconstruction and building alliances with poor whites. And Johnson had promised to reduce help to the former slave. Any historians in here? He had promised to allow the South, to the racist slaveholders, an easy return to the Union. The racist slaveholders feared what a truly black-white Reconstruction political majority would do, so they protected Johnson from impeachment and guilt, and finding him guilty out of fear. This caucus must remind the nation that abuse of power has always worked to undermine the work of Reconstruction. Andrew Johnson was impeached for illegally removing Lincoln's Secretary of War. But remember, that was immediately after the Civil War, when the Union troops were still in the South to enforce Reconstruction. Johnson was flagrantly defying Congress in order to undermine the rights of America's newest citizens. Now, they weren't able to remove Johnson for his abuse of power. Hear me, those of you that have been working so hard recently. I want to give you some hope. I want you to hold your head up. Hear me. They were not able to remove Johnson for his abuse of power. Impeached, but he didn't get found guilty. But the radical Republicans who impeached Andrew Johnson in an election year, listen now, used that process to reclaim their authority. He didn't get found guilty, but they used the legitimate impeachment to rally the electorate that fall. And a new president was elected, Ulysses Grant. And then the Congress took over Reconstruction and reclaimed the moral and constitutional authority of the Congress to both check a president's abuse of power and push forward a moral agenda that would expand access to health care and election voting rights in the South for poor blacks and white Americans. And if you know this history, we can remind America that an impeachment that stands for what's right can actually build power even if you don't ultimately find the person guilty. Y'all better hear what I'm saying. The rise of the Southern strategy under Nixon was also about fear. Touch your neighbor, say fear. As King said, the racist aristocracy fears the power of the civil rights movement, the anti-war movement, and the anti-poverty movement coming together. And one of the reasons King was killed, one of the reasons he was killed then was that they even used some black leaders to stand up against his call for a poor people's campaign, because it was him, the Jewish Federation, welfare rights workers, and Latinos and others, and they knew the power of a movement united around dealing, Barber, with the issue of poverty. You've been a prophet in the midst of this body. I hope they finally hear you. So they came together to stand up against the white Southern strategy. And the Southern strategy used, listen, positive polarization, code words to split poor, low wealth, and black and brown and white from each other out of a fear of what happens if they come together. Fear! And God has not given us a spirit of fear. Fear has always been the backdrop of regression we've seen in this country. Like Johnson in the 1800s, Nixon in the 1960s, before Trump and McConnell and extremists who have hijacked Lincoln's Republican Party and turned it into Strom Thurmond's dream are really showing us the white man's fear. Fear of a truly multicultural democracy with a moral fusion agenda that speaks to all people regardless of race, creed, color, or sexuality. Black folk better get over their homophobia. For them, this is a war of worlds, and it's rooted in fear because they know what is possible, so they fear it. And Trump is the iconography of the latest embodiment of this fear. He is the latest patron saint to this fear. Johnson was the saint in 1867. Rutherford B. Hayes was the saint in 1877. Woodrow Wilson was the saint in 1917. And Nixon was the saint in 1968. And Reagan, who began his campaign in Philadelphia, Mississippi, was the saint in 1980. And Bush, who cheated and won Florida and would take us to war under false precedent, he was the saint in 2000. Trump is just the latest. So the cover-up to keep him in office is rooted in the fear of a demographic and political shift that is inevitable. We can't stop it, but we can hurry it up. You say, they can't stop it, but we can, GK, hurry it up. They fear the possibility of fusion coalitions. And you know what? In this season, Congressman Jackson, in this season, we need to actualize their fear. Since they're afraid, we need to actualize their fear, and some of them might repent and come on over here with us. This is not the time to be depressed or deterred. We must build the very thing racism is afraid of, a multicultural moral fusion movement that is aggressive in this nation. Their fear is evidence of our power. Their actions are evidence of our power. And we must decide, in the face of all this cheating and all this cover-up and all this stealing the Supreme Court seat, to do what Frederick Douglass did when the Dred Scott decision came down. And they said, that's it. That's it, Jesse. I don't need to be talking about slavery. That's it. Dred Scott decision, that's it. And Frederick Douglass was speaking before a mixed audience of black and white. This is what he said. He said, yes, yes, yes. If you allow it, the slaveholder intends to use every effort to hold on to power. And they will engage in monstrous attempts, and it may seem overwhelming. He said, but that's just one point of view. He said, there's another point of view. The abolitionists and colored people should meet this decision, the Dred Scott decision, unlooked and monstrous as it appears, in a cheerful spirit. Watch me now. Watch me now. He said we should meet the Dred Scott decision, Maxine, with a cheerful spirit. It's Frederick, 1857. He says, this very attempt to blot out forever the hopes of an enslaved people may just be one necessary link in the chain of events preparatory to the downfall and complete overthrow of the whole system. I heard my grandmama say, what folks mean for evil. Hey, God, I feel something right now. God can turn it to good. Then Frederick Douglass went on to say, the whole history of the anti-slavery movement is studied with proof that all measures devised and executed with a view to allay and diminish the anti-slavery agitation has only served to increase, intensify, and embolden that agitation. In other words, turn to your neighbor and say, neighbor, everything that tried to stop us and stop me from getting here failed and only served to make me stronger. I wish I had a witness here. I wish I had a witness here. Listen, the forces of regression feared abolition. So the abolitionists said, let's make their fears real. If they fear you, then let them feel you, baby. Huh? They built the movement. They saw their pride, their arrogance, which comes before destruction. And they built and kept building what the racists feared. It only serves, Frederick Douglass says, to increase, intensify, and embolden our agitation. Touch your neighbor and say, this mess has increased, intensified, and emboldened my agitation. This must be our attitude now. We who love justice, truth, and righteousness, we must see the possibility of this nation, Alma, because if anybody fights you this damn hard, you must be mighty powerful. Good God from Zion. Yeah. 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 Somebody turn to your neighbor and say, stop fearing and start fighting. Which leads me to my final point. As we come here today, and we visit you all here today, in this moment, in this seat of power, we cannot leave the roots of what our parents and foreparents taught us. I don't care how much power there is in D.C., there is another power, far greater than the power that's wielded in this place. It's the power that keeps me walking when my doctors say I'm supposed to be on my sick bed. Yeah, Chaplain Black was a prophet and didn't even know it. When he said the other day, he said, God is not mocked. You will reap what you sow. And let me speak pastorally to the members of the caucus. I know you've been fighting. Good God Almighty, Maxine. Good God Almighty. I know sometimes it hurts out here, Sheila. I know what they've done, but let me tell you something. Let me tell you something. You cannot forget that every seat you occupy in this Congress was, unlike the other seats, is covered in blood. Good God Almighty. Every seat you hold is covered in blood. And is covered in the faith of our foreparents who knew God always has the last say. They knew greater is he that is in us than he that is in the world. They understood you might have Friday crucifixion, but hold on, baby. Keep on shaking in the grave because resurrection is coming. So I stop by to remind you as you walk the halls of human political power, get your heads up. I came by to tell you, you've been called to serve and to remember not who you are, but whose you are. That there's another power at work, and it's the politics of God. And with God, that which is meant for evil always turns to good. I wish I had a witness. How else do you think our foreparents kept looking up when everything around them looked down? How do you get up from 250 years of slavery with the hope of freedom? They weren't naive. They weren't foolish. They knew God. And we can't get so compromising and so doggone sophisticated and so in love with a party, any party, or so in love with political power that we forget there is God. And when things are tough, Sojourner Truth used to ask Frederick Douglass, is God dead? I dare you to turn to somebody in this place. I know you're pretty this morning. I know you got on these nice suits this morning. I know you got these titles, but that ain't how you were raised, baby. Some of y'all were raised in them wooden churches with the wooden floor. And I dare you to look at somebody and ask them, is God dead? Yes, go. Because one of these days, we're going to all die. And when you die, if you have a funeral in a black church, I'm going to tell you how it's going to go down. Some people who would not get off when you were living, they're going to take off that day. And some members are going to want to ride in a limousine because they're not going to get another chance. And people going to want the choir to sing real good, and they're going to sing that song, I Won't Complain, and they just finished complaining. The preacher going to preach that day because he won't see some folk next Sunday. The service won't be too long, and when it's over, they're going to take you to a cemetery, and they're going to throw you in a hole. Now, you call it a grave, but I'm telling you, it ain't nothing but a hole. And before they go back to church, they're going to forget all about you. And they're going to start talking, child, it's hard, bad to see you in times like these. Lord have mercy, how you been? How the children? You're laying there in the hole. And on that day, your title won't matter, baby. Bishop Barber won't matter. Congressman so-and-so won't matter. Senator so-and-so won't matter. City council won't matter. On that day, all that will matter is, do you have a testimony that you kept the fight and you kept the faith and you stood up and you didn't bow down, and you stood up for justice. And I know that's right. And I want to tell you that Pharaoh had the title, but Moses had the testimony, and Pharaoh had to come down. I want to tell you that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that the Negro had the testimony. I want to tell you that Goliath had the title, but David had the testimony. And David taught us the bigger they come, the harder they fall. I want to tell you that a mean king had the title. He acted like Donald Trump, but Esther had the testimony. And when it was all over, his people were delivered. They tell me the jailer had the title, but Paul and Silas had the testimony. They tell me the slavery had the title, but Harriet Tubman and William Lord Garrison and Frederick Douglass had the testimony. They tell me Jim Crow had the title, but Thurgood Marshall and white lawyers and black lawyers and Jewish lawyers, they had the testimony. They tell me segregation had the title, but Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King and C.L. Franklin and James Reed and a white woman named Viola Wilshire, they had the testimony. They tell me apartheid had the title, but Alan Bosak and Bishop Tutu and Nelson Mandela and Winnie Mandela and the mothers of South Africa, they had the testimony. And one Friday, my God, one Friday, Herod had the title, Pilate had the title, Caesar had the title, the Sanhedrin had the title, the governor had the title, the rulers had the title, and they said if Jesus wouldn't bow to injustice, they would crucify him. He didn't bow, and they did what they said. Friday, it looked like the titles won. On Wednesday, tomorrow, it's going to look like the titles won. It looked like folk without a conscience lost all night Friday, all day Saturday, all night Saturday. But early Sunday morning, Jesus got up with my testimony. This cover-up is a call to action. Will we have titles, or will we have a testimony? Will it be said when we're dead and gone that we did not bow down, we did not stand down, we did not give up, but instead we took our place in history and saved the heart and the soul of this democracy?
You want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered? YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. See that name right there? Roland Martin Unfiltered. Like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications so when we go live, you'll know it. You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com.
Hey everybody, this is Sherry Shepherd. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered, and while he's doing Unfiltered, I'm practicing the wobble. Yes, I am. Because Roland Martin's the one, he will do it backwards, he will do it on the side. He messes everybody up when he gets into the wobble, because he doesn't know how to do it, so he does it backwards. And it messes me up every single time. So, I'm working on it. I got it. You got Roland Martin.
Hi, my name is LaToya Luckett, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Mac Wiles, and you are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
What's up, y'all? It's Ryan Destiny, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
What up, Lana Well, and you are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Hey fam, want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered? The blackest show on all of digital, cable, and broadcast. Check out our audio podcast. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. Press play.
much.